Well, he did it. Colts general manager Chris Ballard mentioned earlier this week he ended the presser by saying, "We'll see you on Thursday, or maybe not," implying that there was a chance that the Colts could trade back in the draft. I talked about it a little bit in my last podcast, and I really talked about how I didn't like that. I didn't like that, the thought of moving back and losing on one of the guys that you could have there at 26 who you look at went 26 and there's obviously talent there. So looking at it at face value, it's really kind of tough to digest. I think looking at who was on the board, the big story was Montez Sweat. And this is one of the guys that was projected top 15 or so. An absolute freak, had a 4.42 as a defensive end. He ran that in the combine. He had 21 and a half sacks in 2 seasons at Mississippi State and over 23 or over 27 tackles for losses. He's 6'6", 260 pounds, and freakishly athletic, and was available there for you at 26. But there were some issues there. There were some concerns and some red flags that popped up. There were some talks about the heart issue that he has maybe being a bigger of an issue that they originally thought going into the combine, that maybe he was misdiagnosed. There's also some concerns with his attitude and being uncoachable at times, and that's the one thing that Ballard doesn't like in players. He obviously is looking for the character guys, the guys that are going to fit in the locker room, the guys that are going to be coachable by Coach Frank Reich. And maybe that's not what Montez Sweat was behind the scenes. I think that he even got, he ran the 4.42 40, and he caught the eye of Colts general manager Jim Irsay. And looking at that, so that this is obviously a guy that the Colts had on their radar and have probably had on their radar since last summer, probably. Everybody knows who Montez Sweat is, and everybody that did a little bit of covering for the draft knew who Montez Sweat was. I thought this was a guy that was top 15, and I even looked at the possibility of Christian Wilkins falling to the Colts at 26. Boy, was I wrong, as he ended up going 13 to the Dolphins. I thought that it would be kind of a reverse, that Wilkins would be the one that would fall, and I thought that there was really no issue with Sweat. I knew that there were some issues with his character and some issues with his heart, but not enough to sway other general managers from picking him. And you look at the guys who got picked before him, and it's kind of surprising to me. The number one that's surprising is Cleveland Farrell going to the Raiders at the 4th pick, and you look at that, and that's a guy that I talked about in my last podcast, that there was a possibility that the Colts could be looking at him with the 26th or even the 34th pick. A lot of guys had him ranked pretty low, and maybe not second round low, but definitely 20s low. And pretty crazy to see Cleveland Farrell go, to see Montez Sweat fall all the way down, to see Dexter Lawrence be picked so early, who I thought a lot of early. I thought that he was a big disruptor at the defensive tackle position, and I liked some of the things that I saw from him for sure. I liked Jeffrey Simmons. This was another guy that was on the Colts radar that came and visited, and he goes to your divisional opponent, the Tennessee Titans. So two guys that I really thought that could fit with the Colts went early, and as the night went on and more names started to fall, I found myself really looking at Montez Sweat. From about the 15th pick or so, I was looking at that possibility. Looking at it now and having a little bit of time to digest it a little bit, I think that it's not necessarily a Ballard pick. It's not a completely safe pick. There comes a little bit of question there, a couple of different ways. So that's the way that I see it. I think the talent is enough for me that I probably would have pulled the trigger. He's a top 15 talent, and he's your defensive end. He's your pass rush. And the Redskins had enough inclination that they were going to take him there with the 26th spot. So I'm not going to overly criticize Ballard at all. I'm not criticizing him. I think that he definitely has his reasons, and aside from Sweat, maybe nobody was jumping off the page to you as far as guys that you wanted to draft there. You still had Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Abram, who went back to back after you, and those guys that kind of hurts, for me to look at, because when I saw Montez Sweat when I saw the Colts traded the 26th pick all the way back to the 46th pick in the draft, and I'm going to go into it in just a few minutes. I'm going to go into kind of why I disagree with it. But when they traded back, I was like, well, and I was thinking in my head, I was like, maybe Tillery will be there at 34. Well, the Chargers had different plans, and their defense is just seeming to get a little better. Jonathan Abram, who I thought probably your best safety, he had some connections with the Colts, and he goes to the Oakland Raiders there at the 27th pick. And looking through the list, DeAndre Baker, one of the top corners, goes, the offensive tackle from Washington, and N'Keal Harry goes to the Patriots at 32. So that's finishing up the first round. So the Colts will continue tomorrow with the 34th pick. So basically, still a first round pick almost. So there's still a lot of guys on the draft board. And Ballard has said that guys on he said earlier this week in his presser that him and his team had 8 or so guys on their big board that they were looking at with the 26th pick. I'm sure now, well, we know now, Montez Sweat was not one of those guys. And I think that Tillery was probably still one of those guys. But they, maybe they thought he would fall. He went after you, and there are a couple quotes that I wanted to talk about a little bit. He said that Ballard said that the thought of trading up really never crossed his mind tonight. He said that he had a feeling on Monday that trading back was going to be the route. Best thing for us long term. And the problem that I have with that in that statement, I agree with it, and I agree if it does help you long term, and that's what you're looking for. The part that I don't really understand is you move back 20 picks, and all you get is a second round pick in the 2020 draft, which I'm not overlooking second round picks at all. I think that especially with the Washington team that we don't know how they're going to be, that could be a decent pick for you next year and could certainly help you long term. So Ballard is on the money when saying that this is definitely a long term view when you're trying to win now. But I just don't think that anyone was jumping off the page to him. I thought, to me, Sweat was the one and only jumping off the page. I liked Tillery. I liked Jonathan Abram. I liked Chauncey Gardner Johnson. I even like some of these receivers that are still available. But he had a different view. And he said earlier this week that he thought that the talent between pick 15 and pick 70 were kind of on a similar scale, that he had a lot of those guys kind of jumbled together in his overall grades for the players. So he thought that from pick 15, those weren't the blue chip guys that he thought. I still thought that, as far as on just a talent standpoint, that Montez Sweat is one of those guys that could be your blue chip talent. And Ballard on Montez Sweat, he only said one thing tonight after the draft when asked about it. He said that he didn't want to get into details. Good player, though, very talented. So talent is not an issue, I don't think. I don't think there's any reason to believe that, or he wouldn't have been so highly looked at. There is a reason why he fell. And you look at it, and the health concerns are the number one thing, and the number one thing that the Redskins are really going to have to be looking into. One thing that with Ballard that not necessarily every other general manager goes through when processing a player is how they are, being coachable and being egotistical. He's not looking for the egotistical guy where you would have went out and got Antonio Brown. So it makes sense to me if that's his reputation and if that's how he carries himself, and that if he was on their radar and he had an interview with the Colts, then that's why they didn't take him. He didn't impress Ballard. So I believe in Ballard, and I don't think anything less of Ballard. I still 100% have faith in what he's doing. I just really think that you could have got more value for your 26th pick if you wanted to move back. I don't have really necessarily the problem with them moving back as well, aside from that I spent 3 hours waiting for the Colts to pick. But you only got one second round pick, and it doesn't help you right now. When I really think that you're trying to go for it this year, right? You're trying to win now. And I think it says a lot too that maybe the defensive end, offensive tackle position isn't as glamoring of need maybe as we thought, or as I thought. I thought that even after Ballard said earlier this week that he thought that the talent coming to the Colts, it was all depending on who was there and who was available. I think that when you took your Christian Wilkins off the board and your Jeffrey Simmons off the board, that those two guys, maybe he was looking a little more at, Cleveland Farrell or Dexter Lawrence or something like that too. And the fact that they got picked changed his mind a little bit, even though he still thinks that there are players on his top 8 that are still available and that he can get here with the 34th pick. I just think that maybe it's not going to be that defensive interior position. that I thought was a lock. I thought that regardless of really who was picked, if Wilkins was picked, obviously I didn't. I wanted him to come to the Colts because I love him as a player, and he he did not fall all the way to 26. But there are people that fall every year, and Montez Sweat just happened to be that guy this year. So that's my initial reaction. I don't want to criticize Ballard too much, and I still think that you're going to get a lot of players here in the second round. You have 3 picks here in the second round now, and you're in 1 in the third round. So Friday the Colts are going to be busy tomorrow, and look for them to really get some players here. Darius Leonard, the maniac, was picked in the second round last year. So don't doubt Ballard. He's had 2 good drafts in a row. I've talked about in detail Ballard's 2 drafts leading into this one already, and don't doubt him. It's a little frustrating, especially for you guys that spent time and watched the draft today, but have faith. Have a little faith in him, and I think he's going to lead us a long way. And we might not even think that tomorrow. That there might be something that happens tomorrow or the next couple days that we don't understand, but it might make sense come mid December. We don't know, and him and his staff have done over 1,700 hours of scouting on these guys since the recruiting process began. So I have a lot of merit in their thought, and this is not a stupid thing to do. I don't think at all. I think that the big losers of today are the New York Giants. Let's be real, but pretty pretty crazy, the outcome to me, and I still thought that it was a possibility. I didn't like it as much. I think, looking at it as a fan, you're wanting that first round pick, and you spend all day watching the draft and getting ready and doing these mock drafts. Yeah, you want that 26th pick. You want to be right. You want to get the guy, and you want to see who's going to who's going to be your future guy. I thought this podcast was going to be about the first round pick, and I'm here tonight talking about how the Colts traded away the first round pick to get a second round pick and a future second round pick in the 2020 draft. Pretty unbelievable stuff, but in Ballard we trust, and I will continue to say that. And I'm not going to criticize Chris Ballard for this, but Montez Sweat was there. Looking at the 34th pick and who's available, you're you've got some wide receivers that you're looking at that could go here second round with maybe the 46th pick now. That's a possibility. N'Keal Harry is gone. You have AJ Brown, you have Metcalf, you have Paris Campbell. You have a lot of options there. You have 2 really good, or 3 safeties that you could look at with Gardner Johnson, who I think is your best safety left in the draft. Taylor Rapp, a safety from Washington, and Nazir Adderley, another guy that I've talked about on this podcast that's going to be probably a mid second round guy, and still some corners. Byron Murphy is still out there, and Greedy Williams as well too. As you see, DeAndre Baker was the first corner that was taken, and the only corner taken in the draft. Still a lot of options that you could do, and some interior defensive linemen still available for you, but your best ones are gone, and I think that's seen, and why I wouldn't be too surprised if the Colts go with the safety with the 34th pick. It would not surprise me at all. Looking at how they've passed on Tillery and Sweat, and and LJ Collier, another defensive end that went. So so now, I'm just, that's all I want to talk about today, and we'll see what these three picks do. I'm hoping for one of these picks to be a safety, and I wouldn't also mind an interior defensive lineman, and a wide receiver wouldn't hurt either, even with the 34th pick. I mean, I think it's still high, and that's been the debate for the past month. But this really kind of throws everything for me, because to me, is I'm kind of reading this into to Ballard is looking a little elsewhere than pass rush. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll go with a pass rusher here with the 34th pick that he's got his eye on. But I just have a feeling that it's not going to be, and he's going to go with the safety. But we'll see tomorrow. And I'll be coming out with a podcast later this week, or later this weekend, talking about the second and third round picks, and finishing up the draft earlier this, or later, come on Monday and Tuesday, when I can kind of finalize it up and talk about it then. Thank you guys for listening, and don't be too down. Hopefully, it's just doesn't make a whole lot of sense necessarily, but Ballard and his team know what they're doing. So trust the process, guys. Thanks for listening to another Indianapolis Colts podcast. If you did like it today, please leave a like and hit the subscribe button. I'm gonna be talking a lot more Colts draft, and a lot more things Colts leaned into the 2019 season. I appreciate it so much, and I'll be back later this week.